Noah Carter had never been the kind of man to attract attention. He worked from home, kept his yard tidy, and exchanged only the necessary pleasantries with his neighbors. For the most part, people left him alone, which was exactly how he liked it. That changed one Thursday afternoon in Maplewood, Missouri, all because of one simple decision. Noah had just wrapped up a long morning of work and decided to take a break by checking his internet speed. Lately, his Wi-Fi had been acting up, video calls buffering, music lagging. At first, he figured it was just his internet provider being unreliable, but something felt off. Curious, he opened his router settings on his phone and immediately spotted something strange. A device was connected to his network, and it wasn't one of his. The name wasn't the usual string of random letters and numbers. It had been deliberately labeled Maplewood_01. That was weird. Noah lived alone. He only had a few devices connected, his phone, laptop, and TV. He never gave out his password, so who was using his Wi-Fi? Annoyed, he did what any rational person would do. He kicked the unknown device off his network and reset his password. For a stronger signal, he stepped outside onto his driveway, phone in hand, typing in the new credentials. That was when Olivia Harper saw him. From her kitchen window across the street, Olivia spotted Noah standing in his driveway, staring at his phone, fingers moving quickly. To her, it looked suspicious. She had never really trusted him, not for any real reason, just because he kept to himself. He never came to the neighborhood barbecues, rarely waved when people walked by. And now here he was, standing outside, tapping away on his phone like he was up to something. A thought crept into her mind, and the longer she watched, the more convinced she became. He was hacking. Hacking what, she didn't know, but she felt it in her gut. Something wasn't right. Before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Yes, I need to report something suspicious. My neighbor, he's outside, messing with his phone. I don't know what he's doing, but it doesn't look right. Can you send someone to check it out? The dispatcher asked a few standard questions, but Olivia had no real answers. She just kept repeating, he's up to something. I just know it. The police were on their way, and Noah had no idea that his quiet afternoon was about to turn into something far bigger than he could have imagined. If you've made it to this second, hit the like button so I know how many are still here. Noah had just finished updating his Wi-Fi password when he heard the sirens. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe they were headed somewhere else. But when the squad car slowed and stopped right in front of his house, his stomach tightened. Two officers stepped out. The first was Detective Marcus Nolan, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and an air of authority. His partner, Officer Rachel Carter, was more compact, but carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all. Noah exhaled slowly. Here we go. He didn't move as they approached, keeping his hands visible at his sides. Sir, Nolan called out, his voice steady. We got a call about some suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing? Noah frowned, glancing between the officers. Suspicious activity? I'm changing my Wi-Fi password. His tone was even, but there was a hint of confusion. He already had a sinking feeling about how this was going to go. Nolan exchanged a look with Carter before turning back to Noah. Do you live here? Noah almost laughed. His car was in the driveway. His name was on the mailbox. But he knew better than to get sarcastic in a situation like this. Yeah, he said, crossing his arms. I've lived here for 3 years. Before Nolan could respond, a voice cut through the air. He's lying. Noah turned, and there she was, Olivia Harper, standing on her front porch like she was the neighborhood watch captain, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He's always outside doing something weird, she continued, messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people, and now he's been standing in that same spot for 10 minutes, just tapping away. Noah stared at her, barely able to believe what he was hearing. I was in my router settings, he said flatly, because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi. Olivia scoffed. Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that? Nolan turned to her. Ma'am, do you have any evidence that Mr. Carter has done something illegal? Olivia hesitated. She had plenty of suspicions. But evidence? That was another story. I don't know, she admitted. I just think you should check. Nolan exhaled, his patience wearing thin. He turned back to Noah. Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up. Noah clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything. But he also knew how these situations could spiral out of control. Fine, he muttered, unlocking his phone and pulling up the router settings. Here, take a look. Nolan leaned in, scanning the list of connected devices. His expression changed almost immediately. There it was. Maplewood 01. Who owns that device? Nolan asked. Noah shook his head. Not me. Officer Carter stepped in, her eyebrows raised. So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission? Noah nodded. And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. It's been running nonstop. Nolan's posture shifted. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute anymore. Olivia, still standing on her porch, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Wait, what do you mean running nonstop? Noah turned to her, his expression cold. I mean, someone has been watching, and they might be watching all of us. Silence settled over the front yard. For the first time, Olivia felt uneasy. She had been so sure she was the one in the right. But now doubt crept in. Spying? That wasn't what she expected to hear. Nolan's voice was more serious now. Let's go inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Noah didn't argue. He led the officers into his house, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a suspect in his own home. Olivia hesitated before following. She wasn't sure why, but something told her she needed to hear this. Inside, Noah placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The list of connected devices appeared. There it was again, Maplewood 01. Still connected, still active. Officer Carter leaned in, scanning the details. Can you see what kind of device this is? Noah clicked around, his fingers moving fast. I can't tell exactly, but... He opened the activity logs and froze. Nolan immediately noticed the shift in his expression. What is it? Noah's throat went dry. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went dead silent. Olivia blinked. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Noah's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mine. He turned the laptop screen toward them. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds. Officer Carter's expression tightened. You're saying someone has been spying on you? Through your own security system? Noah exhaled sharply. That's exactly what I'm saying. Then his stomach dropped. Because the more he scrolled, the worse it got. It wasn't just his cameras. His system had flagged multiple IP addresses. Some belonged to his network. Others, different homes. Oh, this is bad, Noah muttered. Nolan leaned in. What do you mean? Noah tapped the screen. Whoever this is, they're not just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood. Olivia took a step back, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. Noah looked her straight in the eye. You sure about that? He clicked another log. A new feed opened. A dimly lit hallway. A living room. A bedroom. Olivia gasped. Wait, that's... Noah didn't even have to ask. He recognized it immediately. It was her house. Olivia stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Detective Nolan's voice was sharp. How the hell is this happening? Noah gritted his teeth. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake network. A Wi-Fi signal that looks like a normal connection. People unknowingly connect to it. And once they do, their devices get compromised. Carter's face darkened. You mean a man-in-the-middle attack? Noah nodded. Exactly. Olivia's voice shook. So you're saying someone's been... What? Watching me? My family? Noah's eyes never left hers. That's exactly what I'm saying. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Oh my God! Nolan's jaw tightened. All right, we need to figure out who's behind this, and fast. But what none of them knew was that the person responsible was a lot closer than they thought. Noah's pulse pounded as he stared at the screen. The realization settled in like a weight pressing on his chest. Someone had been watching. Him, Olivia, and possibly half the neighborhood. Detective Nolan didn't waste a second. Can you trace where the data is going? Noah's fingers moved fast, navigating through the network logs. I'm not a hacker, but I know enough to check. He pulled up the IP logs, scanning for patterns. These feeds aren't just looping back to my system. Someone's accessing them remotely. Officer Carter leaned over his shoulder. Where's it being sent? Noah hesitated, then zoomed in on a flagged IP address. His stomach dropped. This can't be right. Olivia, still pale, barely found her voice. What? Noah turned the laptop so the officers could see. The data isn't going to some random server overseas. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Nolan's jaw tightened. You're telling me the person behind this is local? Noah nodded. Not just local, close. He cross-referenced the network activity against Wi-Fi signal strength. His breath caught in his throat when the results loaded. It's coming from a house just a few doors down. Olivia took a shaky step back. No, that's not possible. Noah didn't take his eyes off the screen. You sure about that? A creeping sense of dread settled over the room. Olivia hesitated before whispering, which house? Noah cross-checked timestamps and signal sources. A single address came up. He exhaled sharply. 209 Maplewood Drive. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, she whispered. That's... Noah finished for her, his voice cold. That's your house, Olivia. Silence stretched between them, thick with disbelief. Nolan's eyes flicked to Olivia. Who lives there with you? Olivia's face had gone pale. My nephew, Ethan. Officer Carter straightened. How old is he? 22. He moved in a few months ago, after my sister passed away. But no, this has to be a mistake. Noah didn't look away. It's not. Olivia shook her head violently. Ethan's quiet, keeps to himself. Sure, he's always on his computer, but he's just a college kid. He wouldn't do something like this. Nolan's expression hardened. We need to talk to him, now. Olivia swallowed hard. She didn't want to believe it, but deep down, something in her gut twisted in a way that told her this wasn't a mistake. I'll take you to him, she said quietly. Noah stood up. I'm coming too. Nolan shot him a sharp look. Number you stay here. Let us handle this. Noah clenched his jaw. He hated sitting back when he was the one who uncovered all this, but pushing wouldn't help. Fine, he muttered, but you better get the truth out of him. Olivia's hands trembled as she led Nolan and Carter out the door. Every step toward her house felt heavier than the last. Ethan, the boy she had taken in, supported, cared for. This couldn't be real. They reached the front door. Olivia's hands shook as she turned the knob and stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. Ethan, her voice wavered as she called up the stairs. Can you come down for a minute? No answer. Nolan exchanged a look with Carter before stepping inside. We're going up. Olivia hesitated but didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself as they climbed the stairs. They reached Ethan's bedroom door. Shut, no sound inside. Nolan knocked hard. Ethan, this is the police. We need to talk. Still nothing. Then, movement. A chair scraping. Footsteps. Carter's hand hovered near her holster. Open the door. Now! Slowly the knob turned. The door creaked open, revealing Ethan Harper. He looked startled, nervous. His eyes darted between Nolan, Carter, and his aunt. His hands fidgeted at his sides. What's going on? His voice was tight. Nolan studied him carefully. We have reason to believe someone in this house has been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. You want to explain that? Ethan barely flinched, but his fingers curled slightly, as if gripping something invisible. That's crazy, he scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about. Carter wasn't buying it. Mind if we check your laptop? Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't have a warrant. Nolan took a step closer. We can get one, but right now we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse. A long, tense beat. Then Ethan exhaled sharply. Look, He ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? Nolan cut him off. Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes? Ethan froze. Olivia's voice cracked. Ethan, please tell me you're not involved in this. His eyes flicked to her. For the first time, his mask cracked. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he muttered. Carter's eyes narrowed. How far did it go? Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. I just wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi. It started as a joke. But then... Nolan's expression was unreadable. Then what? Ethan swallowed hard. Then I saw the security cameras, and I got curious. Carter's tone was ice cold. Curious or obsessed? Ethan didn't answer. Nolan's patience ran out. How many people have you watched? Silence. Then Ethan's voice dropped. I don't know. Olivia staggered back like she'd been hit. Oh my God. Ethan looked at her, real regret flickering across his face. I swear I wasn't hurting anyone. Nolan didn't let him finish. Ethan Harper, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Ethan's face went pale. Wait, no, Carter was already pulling out her cuffs. Olivia turned away, covering her face as tears welled in her eyes. Noah had been right all along. And the worst part, she had called the cops on him, while the real threat had been inside her own house the whole time. Ethan didn't resist as Carter cuffed his wrist behind his back. He just stood there, staring at the floor, his face drained of color. Nolan read him his rights in a low, firm voice, but Olivia barely heard any of it. Her mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened. This was Ethan, her nephew, the quiet kid who had always kept to himself, who she had taken in when his mother, her sister, passed away. The same Ethan she defended to her neighbors, saying he was just shy, just introverted. And now she was standing in her own hallway, watching him get arrested for invading the privacy of half the neighborhood. Carter tightened the cuffs. Let's go. Ethan finally looked up, his expression a mix of shame and panic. Wait, I didn't mean for it to go this far, he stammered. Noah scoffed from the doorway. You didn't mean to? His voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. You hacked into people's home security systems. You watched them. And what was supposed to happen next? Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. Carter nudged him toward the stairs. We can have this conversation at the station. Olivia's legs felt like they might give out. Ethan, her voice was barely a whisper. Why? He turned to her, desperation flickering in his eyes. I didn't do it to hurt anyone. It started as a joke, I swear. I just wanted to see if I could get into a network. Then I saw the cameras. And then I got curious. Nolan's expression darkened. Curious, he repeated. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't watch all the time, just sometimes. Noah's fist clenched at his sides. You watched me in my own home. Ethan flinched. It wasn't like that. I wasn't spying on you. I mean, I was, but not in a creepy way. Carter let out a cold laugh. Not in a creepy way? Kid, you were breaking into people's private security feeds. That is textbook creepy. Ethan turned back to Olivia. Aunt Liv, please. She shook her head. Don't. Just don't. She didn't have any words for him. What could she say? How could she defend this? Nolan looked over at Noah. We're going to need access to your logs. If there are other victims, we need to notify them. Noah gave a tight nod. Yeah, I can send everything over. Olivia looked at Ethan again, still hoping for something, anything, that could explain this in a way that made sense. All she saw was guilt. Let's go, Nolan said, leading Ethan out the door. Noah and Olivia followed them outside, standing on the front lawn as the officers guided Ethan into the patrol car. The flashing red and blue lights cast harsh shadows against the pavement. Ethan didn't look up as the door shut behind him. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, her whole body shaking. I can't believe this, she whispered. Noah exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He glanced over at her, studying her carefully. You know what's crazy? He finally said, his voice calm but weighted. I was outside, minding my own business. changing my Wi-Fi password. And somehow, I was the one who got the cops called on me. Olivia flinched. She had no defense, because there was none. I was wrong, she murmured. I made an assumption, and it was completely unfair. Noah let that sit for a moment. Then he shook his head and turned toward his house. I don't need an apology, he said over his shoulder. Just do better. With that, he disappeared inside, closing the door behind him. Olivia stood there alone in the middle of the street, the night air suddenly feeling colder. She had been so sure that Noah was the problem. But the truth had been in her own house the whole time. And that mistake, it would haunt her for a long, long time. Ethan sat in the back of the patrol car, wrists bound in cuffs, his face pale under the flashing lights. Olivia stood frozen on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around herself as if that could stop the cold realization from sinking in. This was real. This was happening. Noah remained near his front door, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or just exhaustion. Detective Nolan stood beside the car, watching Ethan carefully. Let's make one thing clear, he said. You're looking at some serious charges here. Unauthorized access of a computer network, unlawful surveillance, potential privacy violations across multiple households. That's felony territory, kid. Ethan's hands twitched in his lap. I know, he mumbled. Officer Carter leaned against the car door. Then help yourself out. Tell us exactly what you were doing and why. Ethan hesitated. His eyes flickered to Olivia, as if hoping she'd step in, but she didn't say a word. He took a shaky breath. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. It started as a challenge, just to see if I could do it. Noah scoffed. Yeah, and burglars just want to see if they can pick locks. Ethan flinched but kept going. At first, it was just about getting into Wi-Fi networks. People are careless. They use weak passwords. They don't change default settings. It was easy. Nolan's expression remained hard. And then? Ethan swallowed. Then I realized I could do more than just steal internet. Some networks were connected to security cameras. I could see live feeds. Carter folded her arms. And that didn't set off any alarm bells for you? Ethan's voice dropped. At first I thought it was cool. Like, I had this secret window into people's lives. Olivia turned away, disgusted. Noah shook his head. Jesus, you weren't just watching me, were you? Ethan hesitated, and that was all the answer Noah needed. Carter leaned in. How many people? Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't know, he admitted. I wasn't keeping count. Olivia's voice was barely above a whisper. Were you watching me? Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor of the car. Yes, he finally said. She let out a sharp breath, as if the weight of that one word had knocked it from her lungs. I never saw anything bad, Ethan added quickly. I wasn't being a creep. Carter's patience snapped. You hacked into home security feeds, invaded people's privacy, and watched them without their knowledge. What exactly do you think that makes you? Ethan had no answer. Nolan exhaled through his nose. How many systems did you breach? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Maybe a dozen, he admitted. Give or take. Noah tensed. So it wasn't just Olivia and me. Ethan shook his head. Number It was all over the neighborhood. Carter shot a glance at Nolan. This just got a whole lot bigger. Nolan nodded. We'll need to notify every household that was compromised. He turned back to Ethan. Where was the footage going? Were you saving anything? Selling it? Ethan's head snapped up. No, I never saved anything. I swear. I just watched. Nolan studied him carefully. That better be the truth, because if we find out otherwise, you're looking at additional charges. Ethan swallowed hard but nodded. Olivia took a step closer to the car, her voice shaking. How could you do this, Ethan? His face twisted with shame. I wasn't thinking. It started out as a game, and then it just got out of hand. Olivia clenched her fists. You violated people's homes. Do you even understand that? Ethan's eyes were red now, like he wanted to cry but knew it wouldn't make a difference. I messed up. I know that. But I swear I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Olivia let out a bitter laugh. Well, congratulations. You did. Noah watched the exchange for a moment before turning to Nolan. What happens now? Nolan's expression was unreadable. He's being booked. Given the nature of the crime, he won't be going home tonight. Olivia's breath hitched. Wait, he's going to jail. Carter's gaze was firm. Olivia, this isn't some slap on the wrist kind of offense. He broke the law. He violated people's privacy. There are consequences for that. Olivia felt lightheaded. She knew this was serious, but hearing it like that, knowing that Ethan would be spending the night in a holding cell, it made everything feel even more real. Ethan's voice was small. Aunt Liv, please. She closed her eyes. The boy she had raised, defended, trusted, she didn't even know who he was anymore. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. I can't help you, Ethan. He sagged against the seat, his last bit of hope draining away. Noah exhaled sharply, looking between Olivia and the patrol car. This whole thing started because Olivia assumed I was the bad guy. He shook his head. Meanwhile, the real threat was living under her roof. Olivia flinched, but she didn't argue. Because he was right. Nolan patted the side of the car. Let's get him out of here. Carter nodded and climbed into the driver's seat while Nolan slid into the passenger side. The engine rumbled to life, and a moment later, the squad car pulled away, disappearing into the night. Olivia watched until the taillights faded, then turned toward Noah. I don't know what to say. He studied her for a moment before shaking his head. You already said enough. With that, he turned and walked inside, locking the door behind him. Olivia stood alone in the middle of the street, the weight of her mistake pressing down on her like a heavy fog. She had been so sure she was doing the right thing, so convinced that Noah was the one to be afraid of. But the truth had been staring her in the face the whole time, and now it was too late to take it back. The street was quiet again. The flashing red and blue lights had disappeared, leaving behind nothing but the weight of what had just happened. Olivia stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The night air felt colder than before, or maybe that was just the realization settling in. Her nephew, her own family, was gone, sitting in the back of a police car, headed toward a holding cell. And it was all because she had never really known who he was. Across the street, Noah stood on his front porch, watching her. His face was unreadable, but there was no satisfaction in his eyes. No, I told you so. Just the kind of tired disappointment that comes from dealing with something you shouldn't have had to deal with in the first place. Finally, he spoke. You still think I was the problem? Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had been so sure, so convinced that Noah was the suspicious one, the one doing something wrong. And yet the truth had been inside her own house all along. She had called the cops on the wrong man. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah didn't react right away. He just studied her, then shook his head. Yeah, you were. The words stung more than she expected. Maybe because she had never really had to face being wrong before. Not like this. I didn't mean to. She cut herself off because what excuse could she possibly give? That she had a bad feeling? That Noah wasn't friendly enough for her liking, so she assumed he was dangerous? None of that mattered now. Noah sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You know what's crazy? He said. I was out here minding my own business, changing my own damn Wi-Fi password. And somehow I was the one who got the cops called on me. Olivia swallowed hard. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, she admitted. I thought I was doing the right thing. Noah let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Yeah. Well, next time, maybe try having evidence before you call the police on someone. Her stomach twisted. She deserved that. I don't need an apology, Noah continued. I just need you to do better. She nodded, but the guilt in her chest didn't ease. Without another word, Noah turned and went inside, locking the door behind him. Olivia stayed on the sidewalk, staring at the empty street. Everything looked the same. The houses, the porches, the streetlights humming softly in the distance. But nothing felt the same, because now she knew the truth. Ethan had violated people's privacy. He had spied on them, watched them in their own homes, stolen their sense of security. And she had been so busy assuming Noah was the bad guy that she never even noticed the real threat. She thought back to all the times she had watched Noah with suspicion, the times she whispered to her neighbors that he was off, just because he kept to himself, and yet he had done nothing wrong. But her? She had done everything wrong. She had judged someone based on nothing but a feeling. She had called the cops on an innocent man while the real danger sat under her own roof, eating dinner at her table, using her Wi-Fi. And now Ethan was facing the consequences, and she was left standing here, trying to figure out how to live with herself. A cold breeze swept down the street, rustling the trees. Olivia shivered, but didn't move. Because this moment, this feeling, she needed to remember it. Assumptions have consequences. Jumping to conclusions can ruin innocent people's lives. And sometimes the real danger isn't the person you're suspicious of, it's the person you never suspected at all. She exhaled slowly, turning toward her house. Tonight she had learned a lesson the hard way, and she wasn't sure she would ever forgive herself for it. Mistakes like Olivia's happen more often than we think. Assumptions, bias, and snap judgments can have real consequences. But the truth? It's not always what we expect. If this story made you think twice, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you want more eye-opening stories, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Because sometimes the most important lessons come from the stories we least expect.